The first mistake happened at 2:17 in the morning. That was the time stamped on the security camera outside Lab C-19 when Dr. Caleb Voss leaned back in his chair, folded his arms across his chest, and closed his eyes. He had not meant to sleep. Nobody ever meant to sleep inside North Lake Federal Research Facility. Not in the lower labs, not in the restricted wing, not with the warning lights pulsing softly over steel doors that could withstand a bomb blast. Not with the glass cages lined neatly against the walls, each one holding something that was no longer completely what God had made it. But Caleb was 26, overworked, underpaid, and desperate to prove he belonged among people who spoke to him like he was still an intern. The hum of the ventilation system was steady. The monitors blinked. The smell of disinfectant and metal hung in the cold air. Behind him, in the center enclosure, Subject S-13 watched him. The squirrel sat unnaturally still. Most of the others paced, scratched, twitched, or threw themselves against the reinforced glass when hungry. But S-13 only watched. His tiny black eyes followed movement with a patience that made the senior scientists uncomfortable. He had once been an ordinary eastern gray squirrel. Now his fur had darkened near the spine into a streak of oily black. The veins beneath the thin skin of his ears glowed faintly when he became agitated. His claws were longer, sharper. His teeth had grown uneven and jagged, like they were trying to become something else. The research files called him a regenerative test subject. Dr. Lenora Vale called him Alpha. The government called him Project Harvest. The official purpose of Project Harvest was medicinal advancement, accelerated healing, tissue regrowth, cellular repair after catastrophic trauma. Soldiers wounded in combat could survive injuries that should have killed them. Burn victims could heal in days. Blood loss could be reversed. Organs could regenerate. That was the version written in clean language for the Oversight Committee. The classified purpose was much uglier. If a body could be trained to heal faster, it could also be trained to break faster. If appetite could be redirected at a cellular level, hunger could become a weapon. If aggression could be increased, reproduction accelerated, and fear response eliminated, then one living organism could be turned into a delivery system for chaos. A medicinal weapon. Something small enough to go unnoticed, something common enough to be ignored, something that could spread. Caleb did not know all of that. He knew pieces, enough to be nervous, not enough to quit. On his desk, a tablet chimed with an alert. Feeding cycle delayed. He stirred but did not wake. Inside the enclosure, S-13 rose onto his hind legs. His nose twitched. A second alert chimed. Cage lock sequence incomplete. The steel latch on the enclosure had not sealed all the way after Caleb's last observation check. It was a fraction loose, barely visible. But S-13 had been studying it for hours. He pressed one clawed paw against the lower seam. Nothing. He pressed again. The latch clicked softly. Caleb snored. S-13 pushed harder. The glass door opened 1 inch, then 2, then enough. The squirrel slipped out with no sound at all. He dropped to the white tile floor and froze. His body flattened low. His head turned left, then right. He could hear things Caleb could not. The movement of air through ducts, electricity inside the walls. A beetle dying somewhere beneath a cabinet. And underneath all of it, calling to him from beyond the concrete and steel, the woods. S-13 moved. He crossed the lab floor in quick bursts, disappearing beneath workstations, darting behind rolling carts, squeezing under the gap of a storage door. He climbed wires, crossed a ceiling pipe, and vanished into an open vent panel maintenance had failed to secure. At 2:43 a.m., the facility's motion sensor detected something in the eastern ventilation shaft. At 2:44, the system misclassified it as debris. At 2:51, S-13 reached the outer service corridor. At 3:02, he found the loading bay. The outside door had opened for a disposal truck. Cold night air rushed in. S-13 smelled wet leaves, soil, insects, blood. He ran. A security camera caught 3 seconds of him crossing the loading dock. A blur of grey-black fur, a flash of red at the torn tag around his hind leg. Then he was gone. Beyond the facility, past the razor wire fence, a thick strip of forest bordered the property. It had been left untouched for privacy, a natural barrier between North Lake and the nearest suburban developments. S-13 reached the fence and climbed. The metal cut into his leg. The tag caught on a curled barb. He twisted, tore free, and dropped to the other side, leaving half the identification band hanging from the wire. He landed in dead leaves. For the first time in his altered life, no glass surrounded him. No lights, no needles, no hands. He lifted his nose toward the dark trees. Then something moved in the brush. A field mouse. S-13 attacked so fast, the mouse never made a sound. By morning, there was nothing left but a tail. Dr. Maya Reddick arrived at Lab C-19 at 6:03 a.m., carrying black coffee in a bad mood. She saw Caleb asleep before she saw the open cage. Caleb. He did not move. Caleb. Still nothing. She stepped closer, eyes narrowing. Voss. He jerked awake so violently, his knee slammed the underside of the desk. What? I'm up. I'm up. Maya's gaze had already moved past him. The center enclosure stood open. Empty. For 3 seconds, neither of them spoke. Then Caleb's face drained. No, he whispered. Maya set her coffee down slowly. Where is Alpha? Caleb stood too fast, knocking over his chair. I locked it. Where is Alpha? I locked it, Maya. She walked to the enclosure, checked the latch, and looked back at him with the kind of silence that was worse than shouting. Caleb began searching under tables, behind equipment, inside cabinets. S-13, he called softly, as though the squirrel might come when summoned. Come on, come on. Maya backed toward the wall phone. What are you doing? Caleb asked. What protocol says? No, wait. If we call this in. If we don't call this in, people die. He stared at her. Maya's hand tightened around the phone. You read the same reports I did, she said. Maybe not all of them, but enough. Caleb swallowed. She dialed. Within 4 minutes, the lower lab was locked down. Within 7, armed containment officers entered wearing black protective suits. Within 12, Dr. Lenora Vale arrived. She was the head of Project Harvest and the kind of woman who did not raise her voice because she had never needed to. She walked into the lab in a charcoal suit, hair pulled into a silver-black knot, eyes sharp enough to cut through bone. She looked at the empty cage. Then at Caleb. How long? Caleb could barely speak. I don't know. That is not an answer. Maya stepped in. Last confirmed visual was 1:58 a.m. The cage alert came through at 2:17. Vale turned her head slightly. So we are discussing a possible 4-hour breach. Caleb's breathing quickened. Vale looked to the containment team. Search the lab. Search the ducts. Search the loading bay. Pull every camera from midnight forward. One of the officers nodded. Yes, Doctor. And nobody leaves. Caleb whispered. Could he survive outside? Vale stared at him. That is precisely what he was designed to do. The first dead thing found in the woods was a rabbit. Then a crow. Then another squirrel. By noon, the forest behind North Lake had gone strangely quiet. S-13 moved through the trees like he had been born there, though instinct and mutation battled inside him. He knew how to climb, how to leap, how to hide. But his hunger was wrong. Acorns did nothing for him. Seeds meant nothing. He cracked open a nut, sniffed the pale meat inside, and tossed it aside. Then he smelled the nest. 3 squirrels lived inside a hollow oak near the creek. 2 females and 1 male. The male came out first, tail snapping, body rigid, warning the stranger away. S-13 watched him. The male charged. The fight lasted less than 10 seconds. When it was over, the 2 females stayed hidden in the hollow, trembling. S-13 climbed inside. By dusk, the forest had accepted a new king. By the next morning, both females were pregnant. They should not have shown signs for days. They showed signs within hours. By the 3rd day, the first litter came. 7 babies, hairless, blind, wrong. Their mouths opened too wide, their tiny paws scratched at the nesting material. By the 5th day, their eyes opened. By the 7th, they were eating meat. The woman's name was Gloria Henley, and the last thing she said to her dog was, "Go on, Biscuit, but don't take all day." Biscuit was a white Maltese with cloudy eyes, bad knees, and a pink collar with rhinestones. He had been Gloria's shadow for 11 years. He slept beside her recliner, barked at the vacuum, and growled at her husband whenever Jerome kissed her too long in the kitchen. That morning, Gloria opened the back door and let him out into the yard. It was a pretty yard, fenced, peaceful. 1 giant oak tree stood near the back corner, its branches stretching over the grass like arms. Gloria left the door cracked and went to rinse a coffee mug. A minute passed, then 2. Biscuit? No bark. She dried her hands and leaned out the door. Biscuit, come on now. The yard was still. She stepped outside in her slippers. Biscuit? Her voice changed, the way voices change when annoyance becomes worry. She walked along the flower bed, checked behind the patio chairs, looked near the shed. Nothing. Jerome, she called, turning toward the house. Come help me find Biscuit. Something dropped from above. It hit the grass with a wet, heavy sound. Gloria froze. For a moment, her mind refused to understand what she was seeing. White fur, pink collar. Too much red. Biscuit lay twisted on the lawn, one eye gone, his small body torn open in places no animal should ever be torn. Gloria screamed so loudly the neighbor across the street dropped a glass in her kitchen. Above her, hidden in the oak leaves, several small shapes watched in silence. One of them licked blood from its paws. By the time animal control arrived, Gloria was wrapped in a blanket on the patio, rocking back and forth while Jerome paced the yard like a man looking for someone to kill. Coyote, one neighbor said. A hawk could have dropped him, another offered. A hawk ain't chewing up no dog like that, Jerome snapped. The animal control officer crouched beside what was left of Biscuit and frowned. The bite marks were small, too small, but there were too many of them. Maybe rats, he said, though he did not sound convinced. Rats don't climb up in my oak tree and drop my dog on my grass, Gloria said, voice shaking. Nobody had an answer for that. 3 days later, 2 cats were found half-eaten in the next neighborhood over. Then a Yorkie, then a beagle puppy. Then something dragged a raccoon into a storm drain and left only the striped tail behind. The local news called it a possible wild animal concern. People online called it everything else. Mountain lion, rabid fox, escaped zoo animal, demon. By the end of the week, every pet in Briar Glen, Ashford Creek, and Maple Hollow was being kept indoors. And the squirrels sat in the trees, waiting. At North Lake, the meeting room on level 4 had no windows. That was deliberate. Windows made people remember there was a world outside. Dr. Vale stood at the head of the table, while satellite images of the surrounding neighborhoods glowed on the screen behind her. Red circles marked reported animal deaths. Yellow circles marked sightings. Blue lines traced water systems, drainage routes, tree coverage, and residential expansion. The red circles were multiplying. A government liaison named Harlan Pierce sat at the opposite end of the table, flanked by two men in dark suits who had not introduced themselves. Pierce looked like he had been built by a committee. Grey hair, tired eyes, flag pin, no expression. "How many?" he asked. Vale did not pretend not to understand. If Alpha bred successfully, impossible to say. Estimate. She tapped her tablet. Given the accelerated reproductive cycle observed in controlled projections, one infected male breeding with multiple females could produce dozens within the first week, hundreds within 3, thousands within 6. One of the men in suits shifted in his chair. Pierce's jaw tightened. Thousands. That is assuming no secondary mutation. What does that mean? It means offspring may adapt faster than the original subject. Pierce leaned forward. "Doctor, is this contained?" Vale looked at the map. Another red dot appeared. "No." The room went silent. Caleb sat near the wall, looking like he had not slept since the breach. Maya sat beside him, arms crossed, face hard. Pierce pointed to the screen. "We are not announcing that a federal lab lost a weaponized squirrel." Maya laughed once, bitterly. Everyone turned. She shook her head. "I'm sorry. Was that the concern? The wording?" Pierce's eyes cooled. "Dr. Reddick, your concern is noted." "No, my concern is a little girl getting eaten in her backyard because nobody wants bad press." Vale looked sharply at her. Pierce said, "No confirmed human attacks have occurred." "Yet," Maya said. The word hung in the room. The little girl's name was Naomi Ellis. She was 6 years old, missing one front tooth and wearing a yellow dress with white flowers when she went outside to play. Her mother, Jackie, was in the kitchen making stew. Music played from a speaker on the counter. Old school R&B, the kind of song that made her close her eyes and sway while stirring the pot. Through the sliding glass door, Naomi sat in the grass with her doll, brushing its plastic hair. The backyard was fenced. Safe. Ordinary. A squirrel ran along the top of the fence. Naomi looked up and smiled. "Hi, squirrel." Another appeared on the tree. Then another. Then another. Naomi's smile faded. The first squirrel dropped into the yard. It did not scamper away like squirrels usually did. It came toward her. Naomi hugged her doll to her chest. "Go away." The squirrel opened its mouth. A thin clicking sound came out. 4 more rushed from the tree. Naomi screamed. They hit her all at once. One latched onto her shoe. Another climbed her dress. Tiny claws scratched her legs. Teeth snapped at her ankles, her arms, the soft skin beneath her knee. She fell backward, shrieking. Inside, Jackie danced, stirring the pot. Naomi screamed again. This time, something in it cut through the music. Jackie turned. Through the kitchen window, she saw her daughter on the ground, kicking, surrounded by grey bodies. For one impossible second, her brain could not make sense of it. Then one of the squirrels pulled at Naomi's dress, dragging her toward the oak tree. Jackie grabbed the nearest thing she could find. A broom. She ran outside barefoot. "Get off my baby." The squirrels scattered at first, startled by the violence of her voice. Jackie swung the broom with both hands, striking one against the patio. It made a sharp squealing sound and rolled, then sprang up and ran crookedly toward the fence. Another squirrel leapt at Jackie's leg. She kicked it hard enough to send it into the side of the grill. Naomi crawled toward her, sobbing. Jackie grabbed her daughter with one arm and swung the broom with the other. "Get back! Get back!" The squirrels retreated up the tree, but they did not run away. They watched. Jackie backed into the house, dragging Naomi with her. She slammed the sliding door shut and locked it. One squirrel crawled slowly down the trunk until it was level with the kitchen window. It placed both front paws on the glass. Naomi screamed again. Jackie called 911 with blood on her hands. The first officers arrived 12 minutes later. By then, Naomi was wrapped in towels on the kitchen floor while Jackie pressed a clean dishcloth to her daughter's bleeding arm. Naomi's sobs had become small hiccups. Her yellow dress was torn. One shoe was gone. Officer Brian Kells stepped into the kitchen and looked at the child, then at Jackie. "You said squirrels." Jackie stared at him. "I know what I said." His partner, Officer Ruiz, walked toward the sliding door and looked into the backyard. The tree stood quiet. A few leaves moved in the breeze. Kells tried to keep his face neutral and failed. "Ma'am, is it possible it was another animal?" Jackie's eyes widened. 5 squirrels attacked my child." "I understand that's what you believe you saw." "What I believe." Ruiz glanced back, uneasy. "Brian." Jackie stood slowly. "My baby is bleeding on my kitchen floor, and you're standing here trying to make me sound crazy." Medics came in before Kells could answer, then more officers, then a social worker. That was when Jackie realized the room had shifted. They were no longer treating her only as a victim. They were studying her, too. Her husband, David, arrived from work and nearly broke the front door getting inside. "What happened? Where is she?" Naomi reached for him. "Daddy." He dropped to his knees beside her. The medics loaded Naomi onto a stretcher. David climbed into the ambulance with her, still in his work boots, still asking questions nobody answered. Jackie tried to follow, but the social worker stepped into her path. "Mrs. Ellis, we need to ask you a few more questions." Jackie looked at the woman like she might slap her. "My child is going to the hospital." "I understand, but given the nature of the report..." "The nature of the report is squirrels attacked my daughter." A black SUV pulled up outside, then another. The kitchen went quiet before the men even entered. Harlan Pierce came in first. Dr. Vale followed. Officer Kells straightened. "Can I help you?" Pierce flashed identification too quickly for Jackie to read. "We'll take it from here." Kells frowned. "This is an active police..." Pierce stepped closer and spoke low. Whatever he said made Kells stop talking. Within minutes, the officers were outside. The social worker was gone. The remaining medics were told to clear the scene. Jackie stood in her kitchen, alone with strangers in suits. Dr. Vale looked out the sliding door at the tree. One squirrel sat on a branch, watching. Vale's face changed, just slightly, but Jackie saw it. "You know," Jackie whispered. Vale turned. "You know what did this." Pierce said, "Mrs. Ellis, we need you to sit down." Jackie's voice broke into rage. "No, you need to tell me what the hell is in my yard." Outside, the squirrel flicked its tail, then disappeared into the leaves. By nightfall, Briar Glen had become a rumor with streetlights. Every porch light was on, every pet was inside. Parents called children home before sunset. Men stood in driveways holding baseball bats, shovels, golf clubs, anything that made them feel less helpless. The squirrels were everywhere now. On roofs, on fences, in gutters, along power lines. Not hundreds yet, but enough. Enough that people noticed they were not acting right. They did not flee from cars. They did not scatter when shouted at. They sat in groups, heads turning together, as if listening to something humans could not hear. At 9:16 p.m., the power went out on the east side of Maple Hollow. At 9:22, a utility worker named Grant Sims climbed a pole near Sycamore Lane to inspect the transformer. His flashlight beam shook across branches. "Probably a chewed line," he muttered into his radio. Something clicked above him. Grant paused. The beam moved upward. Eyes. Dozens of them. Tiny black eyes reflecting white in the flashlight. Squirrels lined the branches around him. More clung to the pole beneath his boots. More crawled along the wires. Grant's mouth went dry. "Dispatch," he said carefully. "You're gonna think I'm joking, but I need animal control out here." The radio crackled. One squirrel moved on to the transformer, then another. "Hey!" Grant shouted. The first squirrel turned toward him, its mouth opened. The attack came like spilled water. They poured from the tree, from the pole, from the wires. Grant screamed and slapped at his face. His safety belt held him upright while they climbed his body, biting through gloves, sleeves, collar, skin. His flashlight fell, spinning end over end. On the ground, the beam landed facing the street. A little girl watching from her bedroom window saw the pole shaking. Then she saw Grant fall halfway, caught by the belt, his body jerking in the dark as the tree seemed to move around him. She never slept with the curtains open again. By morning, the government could no longer bury it. Too many phones had recorded too much. A video of the utility pole attack appeared online at 6:04 a.m. By 6:20, it had 200,000 views. By 7 o'clock, national news had it. The official statement called it an unusual wildlife aggression event. Nobody believed that. At North Lake, Dr. Vale watched the footage in silence. Pierce stood behind her. "You said we had weeks," he said. "I said we could have thousands in 6 weeks under one projection." "You did not say they would organize." Vale replayed the video. The squirrels had not attacked randomly. Some severed lines, some blocked escape, some waited until Grant was high enough to be trapped. "They're learning," Maya said from the doorway. Pierce turned. "This area is now under federal containment." Maya stepped inside. "Containment? They're already in the neighborhoods." "We are establishing a perimeter." "They climb, Mr. Pierce." His face hardened. Maya looked at Val. "Tell him." Vale did not answer. "Tell him," Maya repeated. "They're not just aggressive. They're problem-solving, they're adapting, and every hour you waste protecting this facility, they spread." Pierce said, "The National Guard has been notified." Maya laughed without humor. "Good. Tell them to bring flamethrowers and apology letters." The evacuation order came too late. By then, the squirrels had reached the roads. Cars leaving Briar Glen slowed at the main intersection where something had blocked the street. At first, people thought it was storm debris. Branches, leaves, trash cans knocked over. Then the branches moved. A woman in a minivan screamed as squirrels flooded across her windshield. Her wipers flung 2 away, but more came. They crawled beneath the hood. The engine sputtered. Behind her, a man jumped out of his truck with a tire iron. "Get out! Everybody get out!" He made it 3 steps before they came from beneath the truck. People abandoned vehicles. Children cried. Horns blared. The street became a trap. From the trees on both sides, the squirrels descended. They did not attack like wild animals anymore. They attacked like hunger with a plan. Jackie Ellis stood in the living room clutching a hammer while emergency alerts flashed across the television screen. Outside, the neighborhood had become eerily quiet. No children playing, no barking dogs, no lawnmowers, only the distant wail of sirens. David had spent every spare hour since Naomi's attack preparing the house. Every window was boarded. The crawl space beneath the house had been reinforced with steel mesh. Every vent large enough for an animal to squeeze through had been covered. The chimney had been sealed with plywood, wire mesh, and several layers of brick and mortar. Jackie had laughed when he did it. Now she was glad she hadn't stopped him. Naomi sat on the couch beneath a blanket, her bandaged legs tucked beneath her. Her doll rested in her lap. The television reporter was trying and failing to remain calm. Residents are urged to remain indoors. Reports of aggressive squirrel activity have now expanded into multiple neighborhoods. A loud scratching sound came from outside. Everyone froze. Another scratch. Then another. Something was moving across the exterior wall. Naomi's eyes widened. "Daddy!" David moved to the front window and carefully pulled back the edge of the curtain. His stomach dropped. There were dozens. They covered the front yard. More sat on neighboring rooftops. Others lined the fences, watching, waiting. Jackie stepped beside him and gasped. "Oh my God!" One squirrel slowly climbed the porch railing. It wasn't afraid. It stared directly at the window. Then another joined it, and another. Soon, nearly 20 squirrels occupied the porch alone. A sudden thud rattled the roof, then another, then several more. Tiny claws scraped overhead. The sound spread across the house like rain. Naomi began crying. David knelt beside her. "Hey." His voice was calm despite the fear in his chest. "They're not getting in here." "But what if they do?" "They won't." "How do you know?" He smiled. "Because your daddy is stubborn." That earned the smallest laugh from her. The scratching continued for hours. Occasionally, something slammed against the siding. Several squirrels chewed at the boarded windows. Others dug at the soil around the foundation. None got through. David checked every barrier repeatedly. Each one held. As darkness settled outside, the military evacuation finally reached their street. Floodlights lit up the neighborhood. Soldiers moved house to house. A loudspeaker echoed through the darkness. "This is the National Guard. Stay inside. Help is on the way." Jackie burst into tears. For the first time all day, she believed they might survive. The sound of gunfire erupted outside. Then explosions. The squirrels scattered. By midnight, soldiers were pounding on their front door. David opened it to find armed troops standing beneath bright floodlights. "Ellis family?" "Yes, we're getting everyone out." David looked back at his wife and daughter. Jackie grabbed Naomi. The three of them stepped out together, alive. As they climbed into the evacuation vehicle, Naomi looked toward the trees one last time. Hundreds of tiny eyes stared back from the darkness, watching them leave. The military had arrived at sunset. Helicopters beat the air over Briar Glen. Armored vehicles rolled past abandoned cars. Soldiers in protective gear moved house to house, pulling families from attics, closets, bathrooms, anywhere people had managed to hide. Some houses were empty, some were not. Some had blood smeared along baseboards and claw marks around vents. At the edge of the forest, Dr. Vale watched soldiers unload incendiary equipment. Maya stood beside her. "This is what harvest was always going to be?" Maya asked. Vale's expression remained unreadable. Harvest was designed to save lives. And the weapon part? Vale did not look at her. Maya nodded slowly. "Right." In the distance, the forest moved. Not the wind, not branches. The forest itself seemed to ripple. The first wave of squirrels came low through the grass, then down the trunks, then across the road. Thousands. A soldier whispered, "Jesus Christ!" The command came through the radios. "Hold the line." The squirrels kept coming. "Hold." They crossed the first marker. "Hold." Then the trees behind them erupted with more. The order changed. "Fire." The night turned orange for hours. Briar Glen burned at the edges. The military pushed the colony back street by street, tree by tree, yard by yard. Smoke filled the sky. Sirens wailed until their batteries died. The screams of animals and people braided together into something nobody who heard it would ever forget. By dawn, the first wave was dead. By noon, the second wave had scattered. By evening, officials announced that the threat had been neutralized. They did not say how many people were missing. They did not say how many homes had been sealed with bodies still inside. They did not say what Northlake had created. On the news, Harlan Pierce stood at a podium and called it an isolated biological incident. Behind him, Dr. Vale stared into the cameras with dead eyes. Maya Reddick was nowhere to be seen. Caleb Voss had not survived the night. Neither had Subject S-13. At least, that was what the report said. 3 weeks later, a cargo ship docked in Marseille, France. A tired worker opened a shipping container marked Medical Equipment Federal Transfer. Inside were crates from North Lake Research Facility. Most were sealed, one was not. The worker frowned and stepped closer. Something scratched inside the dark. He leaned down. A small gray paw reached through a crack in the wood. Then another. The worker stumbled backward. From inside the crate came a soft clicking sound. Then many more answered. It had been 6 months since her daughter's attack. The scars were gone. That was the first thing Jackie noticed. Naomi had suffered dozens of bites during the attack. The doctors had warned there would likely be permanent scarring. Yet somehow, little by little, every mark had vanished. Not faded. Vanished. One Saturday morning, Jackie sat behind Naomi on the couch brushing her hair. The sunlight streamed through the living room window. Life had slowly returned to normal. The squirrels were gone. North Lake Research Facility had been shut down. Government investigations were ongoing. People were healing. At least they were trying to. Jackie gently parted Naomi's hair. Something caught her attention. The scar behind Naomi's ear, the deepest bite wound, the one doctors said would always remain. It was gone. Completely gone. Jackie frowned. Baby? Yeah. Turn around for a second. Naomi turned. Jackie carefully examined the skin. Nothing. No mark, no scar, no discoloration. Perfect skin. A chill crawled up her spine. Later that evening, after Naomi had gone upstairs, Jackie opened a drawer where she had placed a folder that contained documents from the hospital. Among them was a report she didn't remember seeing before. Most of it was heavily redacted. Black bars covered entire paragraphs. One line remained visible. Subject exhibits trace exposure to harvest. Serum. Jackie stared at the page. Her hands began to shake. Upstairs, Naomi laughed at something on television. Jackie slowly closed the file and put it back in the drawer. A few minutes later, she called upstairs. Dinner's ready. Coming. Naomi bounded down the stairs, healthy, happy, perfectly normal. She stopped near the kitchen table. A bowl of mixed nuts sat nearby. Without thinking, she picked up a walnut and placed it between her teeth. Crack! The shell split instantly. Naomi smiled and popped the walnut into her mouth. Jackie froze. The walnut shell lay broken on the table. Naomi had cracked it effortlessly, with her teeth. The little girl looked up. What's wrong, Mommy? Jackie forced a smile. Nothing, baby. Naomi shrugged and walked into the kitchen. Jackie remained where she stood, staring at the broken shell, thinking about the report, thinking about the scars, thinking about what had bitten her daughter. Outside the window, the evening sun disappeared behind the trees. And for the first time since the outbreak ended, Jackie felt afraid again.